Good day, everyone. So, today we will have to talk about the comparison of development theories, which are the evolutionary theory, folk urban continuum, which are to be discussed by yours truly, linear stages theory, structural functionalism theory, which are to be discussed by Ms. Ganley Lagrosa, conflict theory, and new growth theory, which are to be discussed by Mr. Daryl Organiza. Firstly, we have the evolutionary theory. So, what is evolutionary theory or evolutionary economics? Evolutionary economics is a theory proposing that economic processes evolve and that economic behavior is determined both by individuals and society as a whole. Evolutionary economics explores how human behavior, such as our sense of fairness and justice, extends to economics and seeks to explain economic behavior and progress in relation to evolution and evolutionary human instincts such as prediction, emulation, and curiosity. When we say prediction, let's say predatory pricing. So, kining predatory pricing, gituyo ni iris deliberate strategy, usually by a dominant firm of driving competitors out of the market by setting very low prices or selling below the firm's incremental cost of producing the product. Ang emulation, somewhat like makigkompetensya, kung unsay na niya sundugon or palabuan pa. So, nga na. One example of evolutionary economics is behavioral economics. The actions of companies are believed to be shaped by more than just a goal to make a profit. Several factors influence and motivate decision making, including local customs and fear of not surviving. In the free market, the survival of the fittest model is rampant. Kitang mga consumers, we have plenty of choices. Few firms can fully meet our needs and everything is in a constant state of flux, meaning that many competitors will be obliterated or ma-wipe out sila kay adto man ta sa kumpanya or loyal man ta sa kumpanya kung asa ma-meet na ta atong needs. History also plays a key role. Entire countries and economies are said to be heavily influenced by their past. For example, nations in the former Soviet Union, who for years were governed by strict regulations, are likely to struggle more to be creative because they were taught or gitudluan sila not to think this way for decades. Conflicting histories mean that the same economic policy should not be expected to have the same impact in every country kay dili tanan applicable sa tanan country. Maybe ani nga country mao siya epekto pero sa uban di. So ang atong economic policy magdepende sa atong economic status sa country. Evolutionary economists believe that economy is dynamic, constantly changing and chaotic, rather than always tending toward a state of equilibrium. So the creation of goods and the procurement of supplies for those goods involves many processes that change as technology develops. Organizations that govern these processes and production systems, as well as consumer behavior, must evolve as production and procurement processes change. This focuses on changes over time in the processes of material provisioning, production, distribution, and consumption, and in the social institutions that surround these processes. As you can see, bisan di pa nga naka-advanced tong country unlike sa uban since nabilong pa man ta sa developing countries, makaingon gihapon ta nga ni-evolve jud. Looking back atong balikon ang sa compare sa karon, nabay changes, nabay development, na 'di ba? So makaingon jud ta 'di ba nga mas gipasayon sa technology atong kinabuhi. Human cultural evolution is also characterized by abrupt changes from one technology to another. The transition to agriculture was essentially complete within in a few thousand years, and the transition to the industrial age was even more rapid. So as fewer resources are available for human beings to harness, control, and transform, fewer potential developmental paths are available. With fewer developmental paths to choose from, evolution becomes limited. To a large extent, evolution depends on diversity and variation, and if diversity is low, certain mechanisms such as natural selection have less raw material with which to work. Evolutionary systems cannot be understood without an appreciation of the interplay between external and internal, micro and macro, order and disorder. So atong i-relate sa biological systems. The economy is an evolving, complex system buffeted by constant changes and boundary conditions. So fire, agriculture, and the steam engine were the qualitative changes in human history. These were the fundamental bioeconomic mutations that redefined the human presence in the planet. So in 1987, Ulrich Schmidt suggested the following elements as the main common pillars of evolutionary economics. So first, there is a focus on economic dynamics. So dynamics are, however, not conceived as movements between states of equilibrium due to exogenous circumstances. Instead, there are continuous processes in which new conditions are generated endogenously out of the economic system. Second, a further element is the concept of irreversible historical time. So this means that economic development is also influenced by past developments, which have an irreversible direction or path dependency. So this does not imply that historical events are viewed as determining factors. So one last element is the focus on explaining innovation and diffusion. So let's proceed to folk-urban continuum. In this, so what is folk-urban continuum? A concept relating to the transition from rural to urban societies. So, investigation of the social, cultural, and economic characteristics of individual societies allows them to be positioned at different points along an evolutionary path. So since the emergence of the cities of antiquity or sa unang panahon, social philosophers have attempted to characterize and account for the contrast between tribal or rural life and the ways of city men. So during the past century, the age-old contrast has been conceived in terms of pairs of societal types such as rural urban or primitive civilized. Okay, so the poles of such a pair are characterized by the opposite extremes of type defining variables such as the degree of importance of kinship or the extent of division of labor in a society. So the range of variation of such characteristics creates conceptual continuum between the opposed polar types. because the types can refer to either communities or societies. Okay, so who developed the concept of folk-urban continuum? So this was developed by Robert Redfield. So Redfield not only proposed the concept of folk-urban continuum, but also he characterized the traits of societies. So he said that the folk and urban societies are placed on the opposite poles and very different. The distinction he made between the two societies was based on the dominant traits of the particular group. So in folk urban continuum, folk society comes in contact with urban civilization and inherits certain characteristics. So a folk society has certain characteristics of folk and certain characteristics of urban. It is between literate and illiterate, between developed and undeveloped countries. So folk society is losing its characteristics because of urban contact, isolation, kinship system, group feeling, homogeneity is no more there. So what is the role of folk culture in the society? So practicing of folk culture helps to make alive the homogeneity and the sense of belonging among a tribe or community. So evidence of this organization and of secularization and impersonal behavior is more evident in relationship between members of different ethnic elements of community. Any attempt to characterize the whole society and to compare it with others highlights that the folk urban continuum deals with the problems of the relative degree of presence or absence of polar characteristics. So thus Redfield says that the folk-like community lost its isolation through contact with the city. It became more heterogeneous, a market economy developed, an indication of disorganization appeared. Increased contact with any dissimilar society results in change. So that he concluded that they were like primitives in their self-sufficiency, non-literacy, and the local, traditional, and sacred orientation of their lives. However, he also found that they were part of the modern urban world and were gradually being assimilated into it. To pursue this process further, Redfield and two assistants studied so Redfield and two assistants studied. So nag-study sila, gistudihan nila. They studied a series of four communities in Yucatan: the modern capital city, a town, a village, and a tribal settlement of Indians. So Yucatan is located somewhere in Mexico. So by comparing these communities in what had once been an entirely Mayan area, Redfield hoped to discover what was happening in the folk culture as it was being influenced by the modern city. In a more general sense, however, he was interested in the shift from the type of society represented by the more isolated village toward the type illustrated by the capital city. So Redfield never defined the urban type of society beyond indicating that it was characterized by antithesis of the folk traits. The latter was set forth most explicitly in the folk society and summarized as follows. Such a society is small, isolated, non-literate, and homogeneous, with a strong sense of group solidarity. The ways of living are conventionalized into that coherent system, which we call a culture. Behavior is traditional, spontaneous, uncritical, and personal. There is no legislation of habit or of experiment and reflection for intellectual ends. Kinship, it kinship, its relationships and institutions are the type categories of experience, and the familial group is the unit of action. The sacred prevails over the secular. The economy is one of status rather than of the market. Okay, so the folk type has been criticized for its obvious lack of specificity and focus. Sorry. So this lack is really both a strength and a weakness. The advantage of the advantage of multiplicity of definitive traits lies in the variety of causal relationships that are suggested. The disadvantage lies in the lack of suggestion is as to which traits should be considered as causes, which as effects, and under what circumstances. If we had the answer to all of these questions, however, there would be no need for the ideal types.
Okay, hello everyone. I am Gandhi Lagrosa and I am going to continue our topic, which is the topic 5, comparison of development theories. And I am going to discuss the two subtopics that are assigned to me. First, linear stages theory and structural functionalism theory. And now, let's start with linear stages theory. So, what is linear stages theory of development? It is a theory of economic development that states every country will eventually reach high levels of development as they follow a predetermined timeline. It is conglomeration of theories about how desirable change in society is best achieved. So we have here the history. The linear stages of growth model is an economic model which is heavily inspired by the Marshall Plans of the US, which was used to rehabilitate Europe's economy after the post-World War II crisis. The model are the oldest and the most traditional of all development plans. It was an attempt by economists to come up with a suitable concept as to how underdeveloped countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America can transform their agrarian economy into an industrialized one. Rousseau on the stages of economic growth. One of the key thinkers in 20th century development studies was Rousseau, an American economist and government official. Prior to Rousseau, approaches to development had been based on the assumption that modernization can characterized by the Western world, the wealthier, more powerful countries at the time, which were able to advance from the initial stages of underdevelopment. The model asserted that all countries exist somewhere on this linear spectrum and climb upward through each stage in the development process. Other countries should model themselves after the West, aspiring to a modern state of capitalism and liberal democracy. Using these ideas, Rousseau penned his classic Stages of Economic Growth in 1960, which presented 5 steps through which all countries must pass to become developed. First stage, traditional society. Second, preconditions to take off. Third, take off. Fourth, drive to maturity. And fifth stage, age of high mass consumption. Now we will explore stage number 1, traditional society. Society is very primitive with limited technology and reliance on subsistence farming. People rely on community bartering rather than an advanced banking system. Society is governed by small ruling elites with strong traditional values. So during this time, there is no scientific knowledge applied, no technical knowledge. So in here, everything is manual. Everything is mattering this time, and then they lack support from other communities, and that is traditional society. Stage 2, preconditions to take off. People see possibilities for improvement, growing specialization and commercialization of skills and investment in infrastructure, growing focus on export of primary production like mining, farming, and fueling and investment through surplus. So in this stage, there is altering of traditional beliefs, challenging all beliefs, growing acceptance of technology, growth and rise of banks, growing efficiency in the context of farming. Stage 3, take off. Economic growth becomes self-sustaining. Huge technological advancement, development of the domestic manufacturing sector, the rapid increase in regional cities and service industries, political modernization and growing domestic demands, greater spending on education and social overheads. So in this stage, there is both of society has come to accept and favor change. In this stage, also there is diffusions of literacy when institution of literacy most of the community members are spending time on education because this stage they believe that education will help them sustain the economy, sustain the growth and development. Stage 4, drive to maturity. Range of domestic production widens. Replacement of imports with domestic production, import substitutions. Increasing diversification and investment from home to abroad. The increasing needs for innovation for a gain of efficiency in existing techniques. So in here, there is what we call a period of sustained change. Technology gradually spread throughout all areas of economic aspects. And then, at this time, society adopts changes. Universal education and mental or medical facilities are created. People began to fail in their choice of the deity. Then democracy becomes established. So that is stage number 4. Stage 5, age of high mass consumption. The economy became heavily geared towards service provision due to exploiting comparative advantages in trade and commerce. High quality world class infrastructures are in existence. Citizens demand durable consumer goods and society becomes highly sophisticated. So in this stage, sector shift towards services, especially because finance, infrastructure, and government material production continues weaker, becomes higher than our living and quality of life broad range of choice for individuals and society. So in stage 5, there is already a stable investment. There is a product of goods and consumption to face by the people in a particular place within the country. So there is stability and sustainability of investment. And now let's move on to structural functionalism theory. So first, what is structural functionalism? Is the perspective which describes the society as a social system that has a social structure of its own, made up of different parts which are interconnected, which works together in harmony to achieve social equilibrium. So we have Herbert Spencer. He saw similarities between society and the human body. He argued that just as the various organs of the body work together to keep the body functioning, the various parts of society work together to keep society functioning. In this perspective, The society's social system is seen as analogous to the human system, wherein all systems of the body should be working harmoniously in order to be functional body. Social institutions. The part of society that Spencer referred to were the social institutions, or patterns of beliefs and behavior focused on meeting social needs, such as government, education, family, healthcare, religion, and the economy. In the human society, the social institutions have specific defined functions in society. All of them are needed and interconnected to achieve social order or equilibrium in society to survive. Next, we have Emil Durkheim. Durkheim believed that society is a complex system of interrelated and interdependent parts that together to maintain stability, and that society is held together by shared values, languages, and symbols. Durkheim believes that individuals may make up society, but in order to study society, sociologists have to look beyond individuals to social facts. Social facts are the laws, morals, values, religious beliefs, customs, fashions, rituals, and all of the cultural rules that govern social life. For example, one function of a society laws may be to protect society from violence, while another is to punish criminal behavior, while another is to preserve public health. We have Robert Merton. He pointed out that social processes often have many functions. Social processes that have undesirable consequences for the operation of society are called dysfunction. Functions of social institutions. We have manifest functions and latent functions. So when we say manifest functions, are the intended functions of an institution or a phenomenon in a social system, while latent functions are its unintended functions. So we have here the principles of structural functionalism. First, societies should be examined holistically in an interrelated system frame. Second, social systems are generally in a state of equilibrium. Third, the functionalists are less interested in the history of a society, but more concerned with social interaction. So we have here the strands of structural functionalism. First, reminds of the need for order and stability. Each institution serves a function. Reminds us people have roles to play in society. Order and stability is important for society. Tell us how to create order and stability. So, kung strengths, syempre di jud mawa ang weaknesses, di ba? So, it fails to address big changes in society, does not recognize the differences in society among power. Not everyone agrees with order and stability of society. For instance, the minorities in society and that this order and stability does not work for everyone. So we have here reflection about our discussion. So each of us is a member of a larger group or society. Whichever role you play, whether you think your role is smaller or big, remember that you matter. Our society needs you to perform your role for the good of all. According to Idowu Koyinikan, the mind is just like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets, and the more it can expand. And that's the end of my discussion. And to continue and to end our topic, let us hear for Mr. Darrell Organiza.
Good morning, Sir Jesse Alde, and good morning, classmates. So, I'm Darrell Organiza, together with Regine May and Miss Ganli Lagrosa. So, I'm here to report about the conflict theory and the new growth theory. So, first, let's talk about conflict theory. So, what is conflict theory? So, conflict theory first developed by Karl Marx. And this theory is a theory that society is in a state of perpetual conflict because of competition for limited resources. So we are familiar who is Karl Marx. So Karl Marx is was a German philosopher, a critic of political economy, economist, historian, sociologist, political theorist, and a journalist. So Karl Marx suggests that conflict theory is um, created or occurred when there is a conflict because of competition for a limited resources. So, conflict theory holds that social order is maintained by domination and power rather than by a consensus and conformity. So, if we say consensus or conformity, it means that agreements or rules. So, conflict theory, as what we have read, that instead of following some agreement or rules, domination and power is on the upper hand in this theory. So those people who are uh, powerful, those who have plenty of money, those who have high positions, have the upper hand uh, in this what we call conflict theory. So according to conflict theory, those with wealth and power try to hold onto it by any means possible, chiefly by suppressing the poor and powerless. A basic premise or argument of conflict theory is that individuals and groups within society will work to try to maximize their own wealth and power. So, it is clearly stated here that those people with wealth and power have the upper hand to hold anything by any means, suppressing the poor and powerless. So the poor here is we all know that poor is powerless. So those rich people, those people who have uh, the high positions in society have the upper hand to hold, to have uh, the resources for themselves. But the poor uh, were uh, nothing to receive, or maybe they receive a little or unlimited, unlike those rich people. So, key takeaways or key points to remember about conflict theory. Conflict theory focuses on the competition among groups within society over limited resources. So what we have talked earlier, uh, competition among groups. So the rich and poor. Competition of what? Competition of limited resources. So conflict theory views social and economic institutions as tools of the struggle among groups or classes, used to maintain inequality and the dominance of the ruling class. So I guess we have three classes uh, in our society, the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class, I guess. So, let's continue. So, in order to understand the conflict theory has sought to explain a wide range of social phenomena, including wars, revolutions, poverty, discrimination, and domestic violence. It ascribes most of the fundamental or basic developments in human history, such as democracy and civil rights, to capitalistic attempts to control the masses, as opposed to a desire for social order. Central tenets means belief or principle. So central belief or principle of conflict theory are the concepts of social inequality, the division of resources, and the conflicts that exist among the different socio-economic classes. The central tenets of conflict or principle theory can explain many types of societal conflicts throughout history. Some theorists believe, as Marx did, that societal conflict is the force that ultimately drives change and development society. So, uh, from the first paragraph, we read about some uh, capitalistic attempts to control the masses, or some uh, causes of this conflict theory. So under the conflict theory, it will cause some social inequality. So we all know that between rich and poor. So the rich have the upper hand of uh, for the resources because they have the money, they can buy, they can benefit uh, the resources, unlike the poor, and the conflicts that exist among different socio-economic classes. So that's uh, the example of conflicts or competition between socio-economic classes. So there are many conflicts uh, that happen today, especially before that. Uh, if we try to uh, percentage between rich and poor, many are poor uh, rather than uh, the rich or the high class or the upper class of uh, family or person. So, uh, but be, even though the percentage of poor people or poor classes is much higher than the rich or the higher class, uh, that's why the competition, the conflict is very rampant because of the percentage of the poor classes. That's why are many from the lower class tend to uh, grab those limited resources, as what the conflict theory mentioned here. So they were uh, competing, especially that resources were limited. And Marx's version of conflict theory focused on the conflict between two primary classes. So here we are. Each class consists of a group of people bound by mutual interest and a certain degree of property ownership. So we understand this kind of people, where the rich people, those people who have a high position in the society. The Marx theorized about the bourgeoisie. This is a French word, I guess. A group that represented members of society who hold the majority of the wealth and means, or in short, rich people. The proletariat is the other group. It includes those considered working class or poor. So bourgeoisie were are the rich people or the high class people, and the proletariat is the lower class people or the poor. So uh, in this, the two subjects in this conflict theory are the rich and the poor. So with the rise of capitalism, Marx theorized that the bourgeoisie, a minority within the population, from what I've talked earlier, that uh, minority meaning there are only few uh, bourgeoisie or rich people or high class people in the society compared to the proletariat or the poor people. So this bourgeoisie or the high class or rich people would use their influence to oppress the proletariat, or they would use their influence, their power to oppress the poor people or the poor class, or what we consider the majority class. Maybe from if we go back again to a percentage, 100%, 20% the bourgeoisie or the rich people, the 80% there is the poor or the proletariat or the working class or poor class. So this way of thinking is tied to a common image associated with conflict theory based models of society. So these two were the models of society, or the basis of this theory, the poor and the rich. Adherents to this philosophy tend to believe in a pyramid arrangement in terms of how goods and services are distributed in society. At the top of the pyramid is a small group of elites. So elites or the bourgeoisie or the rich that dictate terms and conditions to the larger portion of society because they have an outsized amount of control over resources and power. So the rich people or the elite or the bourgeoisie have the upper hand if uh, if we're talking about the resources. They can grab anytime, they can buy anytime because they have the money and everything, unlike the poor. So the poor can't buy immediately because all the resources, or maybe half of the or 80% of the resources will go to the elite. Uh, like uh, example of this is uh, before before the uh, in the in the middle year, when the pandemic starts, when the vaccines were introduced, uh, the the first to bought or to to have a vaccine were the elite persons or the elite groups, and later on the vaccines were uh, distributed publicly. So I remember that uh, elite people were uh, they can buy resources immediately if they want to. They can um, they can discuss or change some laws or consensus or rules because they have the upper hand or they have the power to change uh, the terms, or or they can dictate terms on their own terms. So, an even distribution within the society was predicted to be maintained through ideological coercion. So, in conflict theory, uh, there an even distribution also occurred for what I've talked about earlier. So, the bourgeoisie would force acceptance of the current conditions by the proletariat. So, bourgeoisie, they can dictate their own terms towards the proletariat. If they can set the rules, they want this, they want that. So the poor people can't argue because they don't have power. They are powerless. The bourgeoisie or the elite have the upper hand. So conflict theory assumes that the elite will set up systems of laws, traditions, and other societal structures in order to further support their own dominance while preventing others from joining the ranks. So elite the elite persons or the bourgeoisie, they have the power to set themselves higher to from everyone. They have the the dominance. They have uh, they can set up their own system of laws, traditions, and other societal structures because they have this influence or the power or money, everything. So Marx theorized that as the working class and poor were subjected to worsening conditions, a collective consciousness would raise more awareness about inequality, and this would potentially result in revolt. If after the revolt, conditions were adjusted to favor the concerns of the proletariat, the conflict circle would eventually repeat, but in the opposite direction. The bourgeoisie would eventually become the aggressor and revolter, grasping for the return of the structures that formerly maintained their dominance. So, example of this is uh, if you research about the Hacienda Luisita. So, there is this an influential family, a famous family, a very rich family. So they have this hacienda or a land, a big land. So what they did is this powerful family they lent some land to the farmers as so they lend this land to the farmers in exchange the rice or the during harvest the rice they would sell the rice to the family whom uh, who lended them the land, and they would sell it uh, very cheap in a very cheap price. So the land that this family lended to the farmers were subjected to pay the land as a rent. So uh, the farmers they have a very little what you call this uh, uh, the money from the rice they sell to the landowner. So ang kwarta nga gibayad nga gipalit sa ang kwarta nga gipalit nga bugas gikan sa mga farmers tungod kay barato ra unya dili kaya ang kwarta nga gibayad sa bugas, dili kaya ang kwarta nga halin nga ibayad sa yuta nga ilang gipuy-an nga gihatag sa tag-iya sa datong pamilya. Mo na nga uh, kuwang kayo ang ilang kita. So luoy kayo ang mga farmers, murag gigamit na sila daan the most benefited na benefitan kayo is the owner of the land. Bayaran pa sila sa abang sa yuta o ang mapalit pa dun nila nga bugas is barato. So that's why if you research the Hacienda Losita, so the farmers there before nagwelga sila, they formed a rally. So it was a very tragic that mo to gitawag siya og the Hacienda Luisita massacre. I guess there were 18 people died because of that revolt. They were revolting against that family. So that was my example of one of my example of the under of the conflict theory. So conflict theory assumptions or uh, the true effect or the true effect of under the conflict theory. So conflict theory has three primary assumptions that are helpful to understand. So these are competition, structural inequality, and war. So the first is competition. Conflict theorists believe that competition is a constant. If we say constant, it is uh, constant is conflict is will occur uh, every time. So that's why competition is constant under the conflict theory, and at times an overwhelming factor in nearly every human relationship and interaction. Competition exists as a result of the scarcity of resources. So scarcity uh, or nearly depleting resources, including material resources, money, property, commodities, and more. Beyond material resources, individuals and groups within a society compete for intangible resources as well. This can include leisure time, dominance, social status, sexual partners, etc. Conflict theories assume that the competition is the default rather than cooperation. So if we mean if we talk if we mean competition is the default under the conflict theory, it means that competition is always there. When there is uh, competition is one of the effects of conflict theory. That what it uh, what means of default. So structural inequality. An important assumption of conflict theory is that human relationships and social structures all experience inequalities of power. In this way, some individuals and groups inherently develop more power and reward than others. Following this, those individuals and groups that benefit from a particular structure of society tend to work to maintain those structures as a way of retaining and enhancing their power. So, structural inequality. So there is no balance uh, in this assumption of conflict theory under the structural inequality. So especially the rich and the poor. So the rich have the upper hand. So they can set their own rules. They can set their own terms. That's why structural inequality occurred, or uh, one of the effects that causes conflict theory. So last is war. Conflict theorists tend to see war as either a unifier or as a cleanser of societies. So if we say unify or to unite, or as a cleanser means to eradicate or to destroy societies. In conflict theory, war is the result of cumulative and growing conflict between individuals and groups and between entire societies. In the context of war, a society may become unified in some ways, but conflict still remains between multiple societies. On the other hand, war may also result in the wholesale end of a society. So, uh, some effects of conflict society is war. So maybe conflicts of religion, conflicts of ideas, conflicts of maybe something. That's why war occurred, or that's why uh, this war is one of the effects of conflict theory. So that was all about the conflict theory. So next we will talk about new growth theory. So the new growth theory is an economic concept positing that humans' desires and unlimited wants foster ever increasing productivity and economic growth. It argues that real gross domestic product or GDP per person will perpetually increase because of people's pursuit of profits. So, new growth theory. So, if we uh, realize today there were many products going out, coming out, because companies figure out that people today, unlike before, or it started before, companies or some businessmen or some merchandisers noticed that people uh, would desire more, would want more. Example of this is uh, some mobile companies, cell phones. Every year, uh, another model, another upgrade. So that's why it says here that positing that humans desires and unlimited wants foster. So companies adapt what people wants, what people desires. So that is uh, one of the examples of new growth theory. So key points to remember. The new growth theory presumes that the desire and wants of the populace or the people will drive ongoing productivity and economic growth. So uh, presumes the desire and wants of the people. So the company presumes. So that's why they invent more ideas, create more knowledge and ideas to indulge or to give what people want. And because of that, productivity and economic grows because uh, people eagerly want something. So, next, a central tenet or belief or principle of the new growth theory is that competition squeezes profit, forcing people to constantly seek better ways to do things or invent new products in order to maximize profitability. Example, mobile phones. There are many branches, models coming out every year or every middle of the year. So, company they were innovating technology and everything. So, theory emphasizes the importance of entrepreneurship, knowledge, innovation, and technology, rejecting the popular view that economic growth is determined by external, uncontrollable forces. So, under this uh, new growth theory, uh, innovation, technology, ideas, knowledge is uh, is very rampant in this theory. So knowledge is treated as an asset for growth that is not subject to finite or restrictions, diminishing returns like other assets such as capital or real estate. So understanding new growth theory. The new growth theory offered a fresh take on what engineers economic prosperity. It emphasizes the importance of entrepreneurship, knowledge, innovation, and technology, challenging the view of exogenous growth in neoclassical economics that economic process is determined by external, uncontrollable forces. The theory argues that innovation and new technologies do not occur simply by random chance. Rather, it depends on the number of people seeking out new innovations or technologies and how hard they are looking for them. People also have control over their knowledge, capital, what to study, how hard to study, etc. So, businesses, companies tend to create more products, tend to upgrade their products, tend to uh, more high tech their products, uh, like computers, cell phones, uh, some maybe equipment for household, for carpentry and everything. No, they would think innovative. They would uh, apply some innovations or uh, seeking what people wants, and they would create some ideas, knowledge, technology to answer those uh, people what they want. So examples of new growth theory is under the new growth theory, nurturing innovation internally is one of the reasons for organizations to invest in human capital. By creating opportunities and making resources available within an organization, the expectation is that individuals will be encouraged to develop new concepts and technology for the consumer market. For example, a large enterprise might allow part of its staff to work on independent internal projects that may develop into new innovations or companies. In some ways, the enterprise lets them functions like startups being incubated inside the organization. The desire of the employees to launch a new innovation is spurred by the possibility of generating more profits for themselves and the enterprise. This can be especially true in the United States, as a commerce is increasingly driven by service type companies. Software and app development may take place within companies following the new growth theory. So example of this is let's talk about the Apple company. Before Steve Jobs died, they have Steve Jobs had many staff. They had staff for this kind of department, and other staff for this kind of department. So Steve Jobs would uh, assign them to create some ideas, to create some innovations of what would be the next model or ideas or informations or an upgrade of their devices before they would release some models. So uh, they would uh, they would create themselves, or they would incubate or um, isolate themselves group by group, and then after maybe 1 week or 2 weeks they would brainstorm or talk about some innovations, some upgrades, some informations that is totally that they would agree. So uh, that is other examples of new growth theory, that the businesses or some business owners would try to create some new innovations, knowledge to answer people's wants. So achieving such knowledge-driven growth requires a sustained investment in human capital. This can create an environment for skilled professionals to have an opportunity to not only fulfill their primary jobs but also to explore the creation of new services that can be of benefit and use to the broader public. So that's all for my report about the conflict theory and the new growth theory. Thank you.